What's up, everybody? It is Kris Gethin here, and this is the Kris Gethin Podcast, and we are in Mr. Tim Gray's house here. Tim has been on the show before, and this is his second appearance on it. Special boy. And today, well, we're in the UK because we came over for the Health Optimization Summit that Tim promotes. And this is the largest event in Europe, and I tell you what, it is my highlight of the year. And I'm not saying that because Tim's here, but the event is really, really good. You have an educated crowd. You have people that ask very educated questions. And it seems to be a very loyal following that seems to be growing here. You also put an event on every quarter, is it? The London meetup?
Yeah, Biohacker London, yeah.
The Biohacker London meetup. I went there earlier this year. As myself, you, Dom, is good timing just as I was on my way over to India. And you have this loyal following that is just growing and growing and growing. And the event that Tim puts on here grew by what percentage? Was another 30% this year over last year?
101%.
101%. 101%. Okay, so don't quote me, quote him. And I didn't have time to get to half of the exhibitors. I didn't get round to half of the speakers. There was just so much going on there that it was absolutely phenomenal. And I'm pushing this gentleman to see if there's a possibility to get 3 days so we can at least get round half of it. But it's an awesome event. And Tim is known as London's leading biohacker, or UK, leading biohacker. But it seems to be more like Europe now because you spend most of your time, I'd say, in other countries than you do in the UK. And is there a reason behind that? Is it because you're following the sun? Is it because you're infiltrated with a lot of EMF, Wi-Fi pollutants in the city? What is the reason for you now spending a lot of your time in different countries?
I follow the sun, and if I'm in a city, I need red light therapy, I need hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I need IV therapy. Whereas if I'm in the sun, in nature, with half of the toxins gone, I don't need any of those stuff. So I don't need to spend half my life biohacking.
Got it. So you're more, of course, you're going to be closer to nature, so you're more in touch with your ancestral wisdom as opposed to having to rely on today's technology.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right. Well, speaking of the combination of both of those, today's title of this podcast, we discussed this before, what we want to discuss is your top 5 biohacks as of recent, you know? So obviously at the event, there was a lot of technology exhibitors that I hadn't seen before. So I want to talk about a couple of those. Is there, within this top 5, is there something that has come about over the last year or two that you feel is deserved of that top 5 placing?
Yeah, I mean, the number one is the Human Regenerator. And they're my top biohack of 2023. The Human Regenerator is basically a cellular charger. So it deserves a place because it's like sunlight, grounding, being in nature, all combined in one med bed where you lie down for 30 minutes and it recharges you. So you earthed out for the electrons. You have anions, free electrons and ions. And you can smell a little bit of ozone at the same time. People that are on it, for instance, there's one person I was speaking to about it, there'd been 5-6 sessions, and their warts that they had for years on their hands reversed after 5 sessions, showing that it's giving the body what it needs to heal and rejuvenate. So I found I felt very good from it on the first one, first session, and each subsequent one seems to be better for me. And there's various speakers that have been on it as well, such as Jim Quick at the summit. He had an hour-long session. He said he loved it, felt really good from it. So yeah, it deserves the number one just because it's a technology that reverses technology and being in the city, and it's basically based on nature, but in a med bed.
Yeah.
That's my number one.
But then when I repeated it at the event and did a full 30 minutes, I definitely 100% felt the effects because we were lacking in sleep big time during that weekend of the event. Felt a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit exhausted. Of course, we were getting up early and training in the morning as well. But after that 30 minutes in the afternoon on the Sunday, and of course we went out later that night, I remember saying to Sybil, I was like, I feel great. I feel really, really good. Even though I should have been exhausted at that time, especially past my bedtime of 7:30, I felt really, really good. So I would definitely put that in there as well. Now, just talking about that machine, how many hertz does that push out? It pushes out quite a lot of hertz, and you can't go near the machine because somebody could potentially sap some of that energy.
Well, apparently, it has a 30,000 volt static electric field that you're in. So if you're near it or touch it, then you break that. That's why it needs to be for one person. In terms of hertz, I'm not sure, to be completely honest, but I do know that it's 30,000 volts of static. Yeah, and it's funny because when you first go on it, you feel the kind of like the static electricity. Maybe I find it on my calves usually, and then you don't notice it after a minute because you're just used to it. And then when the session ends, you know when it ends because it feels like when you have a balloon next to your leg and it pulls your leg hair. And it feels kind of like that. So yeah, no. But apparently you're not supposed to share it with anyone.
Okay, all right. So no top to toe when me and you get on it. All right, so we've got that, the Human Recharge, and so people can look that up. We'll put the links in the links below, so you can check that out when you have time. If you're in the London area, then obviously you can come and visit. They have them in other countries as well, but I know here in London they have it. So what else? And some of this could be dependent on if you're in a city or if you are out in nature. What are some of those other biohacks? What's the next biohack that you'd have in that list that you feel is a non-negotiable?
I think the second one my mind goes to is actually the brand Alavar, which is a clean laundry detergent. Now, everyone needs to clean their clothes, and a lot of people wear something once and then wash it. And a lot of these washing detergents have unnecessary chemicals in it. And they have propellants as well, which means that we can smell them, because often if it smells good, people think it's clean. Not necessarily true. The same with fabric softeners as well. Now, people that have eczema, allergies, itchy eyes, histamine reactions, itchy skin from their bed sheets and things like that, which is why sometimes in some hotels, for instance, I'll get into bed and I'll be like, oh, it's a bit itchy, it just doesn't feel right. It's the detergents and the chemicals in them, and they're either on us and we're breathing them in all day, and as a result, these chemicals, our body is building up, a reaction to them. So Alavar actually is a brand that reached out to me when I did a post on how bad laundry detergent was about 6 months ago. And it's a kid, 21-year-old kid. He goes, my mum has this ancient recipe of laundry detergent, which includes coconut soap and 3 other ingredients, natural ingredients. It's brilliant. It cleans everything. Here's the proof. I want you to try it. So I tried it. I was like, fuck, this stuff's good. Like, why am I having all these chemicals in my detergents? Even the clean ones aren't clean, but this is 4 ingredients and it works really well. Anyway, so I've been a big proponent of that, and I think that's a good biohack because everyone uses laundry detergent, and no one pays attention to it. I think for me, because I get really heavy hay fever and seasonal allergies, and I have to work very hard to keep those at bay, one of the things that's been good for me is actually using natural detergent. So it's a biohack number 2, just because it's so widespread and no one knows it's such a problem.
Interesting. So with those allergies, to say hay fever and stuff like that, so you'd say if you're using a laundry detergent that has, various chemicals in there, that it could potentially increase your histamine levels, so you're going to be more sensitive?
It's just total burden for sensitivities and reactions. Mast cell activation is one thing from histamine and various other things, but it's a total burden. Some of these chemicals, especially if you have a stressed liver already, you might not be dealing with histamines properly anyway. Total burden, chemical burden adds up. And I think with the amount of chemicals in detergents and the amount that you can smell, let alone the ones that you can't smell, it adds up. So I have seen that quite a few people, that have had skin allergies and things like that reverse from changing their laundry detergent. For women, sometimes it can be thrush because they have such strong detergents actually on their underwear. It's causing them to get thrush, recurrent thrush. Changing the detergent to something natural stops that. Also, sensitivities, like for instance, some people can get rashes thrush around their groin area or itchy scrotum. Again, this reverses with having a clean detergent, and it's a widespread thing where a lot of people are using creams or taking a Canesten pill or whatever when they get it, thinking that's going to sort it out for good, but it just keeps coming back. So it's widespread, and total burden is real. For instance, if you're living on a desert island, there's no chemicals anywhere. You know, you might get a little bit of hay fever or whatever, depending on the pollen nearby. But if you're surrounded in chemicals everywhere, for the carpets, in your clothes, in the house, in like the city air, all these things add up. But laundry detergents is one of the strong ones that follows you everywhere.
Interesting. And I guess it's of no coincidence that some people would get thrush, or in their crotch area they're going to get an allergic reaction or rash, because these are the areas that heat up the most. Your pores open, and then obviously being the largest organ that we have, is just going to absorb everything that much more. Especially if you're someone like me that runs hot, or if you're living in a climate that is generally warmer, your pores are going to be open that much more to absorb all this, unfortunately, more efficiently.
Well, the other thing is that you have like polyester or the different plastic style materials, which is why, you know, if you wear a cotton shirt, like a linen shirt or something, you generally don't get the same amount of body odor. You know, you breathe more as a result of having better fabrics, whereas when it's plastic-based things, especially around the groin area, it's very hot. In fact, there's a reel I did on Instagram a few months ago. The stats behind infertility and men of having polyester underwear, and it was almost 100% effective in contraception for men in making their balls run too hot, and non-breathable from having nylon or polyester versus cotton, which means it's breathable. Now, obviously body odor comes from having your liver a bit too stressed. So for instance, when I drink alcohol, 2 days later my armpits, I need deodorant, and I generally don't need it at all. But it's showing that my liver is right on the edge, and the alcohol puts it over the edge. If I wear polyester clothing, also my body will smell straight away, and the clothing does, not my armpits. And it's like the bacteria actually cooking in there very, very quickly. So I think if you're using a clean detergent and you're using cotton clothing, your body breathes significantly better. And things like, you know, recurrent jock itch, I think they call it, especially for athletes and bodybuilders and things like that. I think it's very common just because of the amount of polyester and nylon and the body temperature.
Yeah, interesting. So while we're on that subject then, knowing that our skin absorbs everything very efficiently, especially if we're running hot, if you were to have a bath, do you have anything in that bath? And if you're putting in anything on your skin or on your hair, I'm assuming that you're very wary and careful of that too.
Yes and no. So the bath, magnesium salts, Epsom salts, actually have like a 5 kilo tub of it upstairs, which you guys are welcome to use if you have a bath when you're here. So magnesium salts, I don't have it too hot a bath, because I find that if I have a magnesium bath with more than 500 grams of Epsom salts and the bath's too hot, then actually I come out a kilo lighter because of the amount of water that it's drawn out of me.
Oh, wow.
And then I end up having a migraine the next day because I'm just so dehydrated. And hydration is a big problem for me in general. So magnesium baths are the win. You can obviously use full sea salt as well, but Epsom salts I find are the best for me. Warm, not too hot. And then what was the other question you said?
About like, you know, skin products, soaps or hair products.
So yeah, I mean, hair products, I find it very difficult to find anything decent that's natural. And there are some waxes, but a lot of them have chemicals in still. So I just use good old hair gel, but it's on my hair. The only thing is I'm having constant contact with my hands whenever I use it, which is not something I particularly like, but that's one poison that I do pick. In terms of skincare, I'm very selective. So there's tallow-based creams. Actually, there's a brand called something old cow, fat cow, something like this.
Mad cow? Mad cow?
Yeah, so there's a new brand of tallow that I've been using actually in the goodie bag at the summit. But also there's an olive oil brand by the Governor brand of olive oil. It's the stuff that we had over with your lunch earlier. But they do a face cream, olive oil based. So I use that. And also there's Timeline Nutrition, which is actually one of the sponsors for the summit, that have a longevity face cream with urolithin A in it, to help your skin. So I use that as well. But I mean, to be honest, I use minimal products in general. There are a few other brands such as Nibu Naturals, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They use astaxanthin and all the healthy oils and things like that, which are really quite nice. There's quite a few new healthy, clean brands coming out in this area specifically. But I think if, for instance, you have dry skin, using a cream isn't necessarily the right route in the long term. In the short term, fine, it helps. But really it's about hydration, supporting your liver. And, you know, obviously people with eczema or psoriasis or any of these things generally have a very stressed liver and they need support. And while they can hydrate and put creams on and stuff like that, symptomatic relief, really supporting their liver with things like liver bitters, that I know you're a fan of as well. Trying ox bile, which helps break down the fats in your diet, which obviously helps come out through your skin as well. So there's various things like that from the inside out approach, which I prefer myself.
Yeah, because I noticed with some clients, they were supplementing with like 4, 5, 6 grams of oils, EPA, DHA a day, but it wasn't having any sort of effect because their liver was stressed and it just wasn't processing it. And then obviously when they worked on their liver and started, like you said, with the ox bile, then they was able to kind of regulate their skin. And the one thing I thought that was very interesting is that I used to love the smell of lavender and I'd have lavender in my bath. And then I learned from Dr. Anthony J that this could be actually estrogenic, having that in the bath. So I was like, okay, no more of that. I do the same thing. I'll just have some Epsom salts, sometimes some hydrogen in there if I've just had a heavy leg day. That really helps me as well.
It's interesting you say that about the lavender and the estrogenic side of things. It'd be really interesting to see your hormone results because it might be your body going, I like lavender because I need some more estrogen. Like maybe it might have been dipping that week. Or something to help rebalance it, because we're very intuitive creatures. And so, for instance, I found this with several herbs in the past, like for instance, me for nutmeg, always craved nutmeg. I used it, and then all of a sudden I don't need it anymore. So it's often when we crave something, it's actually our body saying we need something from that. So if you think about pregnant women, for instance, they crave, like, for instance, ice cream and gherkins or whatever. It could be the salts and it could be the fat. So we crave something for a reason. That's why we have a sense of taste and a sense of smell. Something that's bad, we keep away from. Something we need, we draw into. The thing is, with obviously processing of foods, they then manipulate it with chemicals to make us think that we need it. Which is why our taste buds are tricked. So with the lavender, I would be really interested to see when there's times that you actually really want a lavender bath. And I just need that. Might be a reason for it.
Yeah, fascinating. Unfortunately, the lavender that I was using at the time just wasn't natural. This is going back a while, obviously. But yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of test that out. You know, it's interesting that you said, you know, about this emotional front. Like I find a lot of clients, if they are lacking in, let's say, meals, you know, obviously they get a blood sugar crash, they're going to want sugar. But a lot of people, when they're lacking in sleep, then they make bad choices. They're emotionally charged. They're going to eat food that they shouldn't have. And the first thing I look at every single client before even touching their nutrition or training is just their sleep. What's their sleep looking like? What's their sleep hygiene? Are they getting enough sleep? Chances are a lot of them aren't. And that's why they're craving and making choices that they shouldn't be. You know, when they're staying up late on a Friday or Saturday night, that's when they're making bad choices because they're tired. You know? So I'll pop in a couple of mine that I feel is essential for me because, you know, I'm an active individual. I've had a lot of injuries over the years, and the non-negotiables for me, doesn't matter whether I'm traveling or not, is, you know, certain peptides like BPC 157 and having stem cells, which we're supposed to be doing later this year. Stem cells have been an absolute game changer for me. Now, whether they can help reverse a biological age, that's still out for question. But for me, it takes about 6 months for it to fully kick in. During that time, I'm usually in a bit of doubt. Did I just waste my time? Did I whatever? Have I stopped training for no reason? Because it's very important not to train for a good couple of months following the stem cells, because obviously the stem cells go towards trauma. If I create trauma from a leg workout, now they're going to go towards my quads instead of my tricep or my elbow where I really want them to work. But I think for me, it's been the best money I've ever invested because I'm an active individual and I have no plans on slowing down anytime soon, even though people say you shouldn't mountain bike, you shouldn't go snowboarding. Well, I'm going to continue to do it. But having the technology of today where we can have stem cells extracted and put in localized areas is phenomenal. And then obviously peptides, like I didn't really find I got anything from a physical standpoint for trauma from TB500 or other peptides. But BBC 157 is really, I've been very, very well receptive to that. Have you used any of these peptides for any sort of reason, such as injury or anything to enhance cognitive function?
So I was on a balance board in Germany a couple of years ago, and I was balancing on this thing, and it went from underneath me a bit quicker than I expected, and I went straight down on a concrete floor, crack, and did my wrist in. And it was bad. It was really bad. I didn't break it, but it done some trauma to it. And there was actually a physiotherapist there that checked it out, and I literally couldn't put any pressure on it for a while. And it wasn't getting any better at all. So I got some BPC 157. I actually had 3 vials of it. And I injected, so 1 a day, into the joint as much as I could. It was bloody painful. It's very sensitive here. And within a week, it was okay again. And I've used BPC 157 for various things, like, for instance, a knee injury that I had. And when I used to run a lot, and it started clicking, so I landed on it differently every time to stop it clicking so I could carry on running, because I just didn't want to stop bloody running. Yeah. But it made it worse and worse and worse and worse. And then so I did a few weeks of BPC 157, and I tested some human growth hormones in there as well, just to throw it in there on top of it. But the knee was never a problem again, and that had been persistent for 5 or more years. And BPC 157, TB500 as well, when they're stacked together, is good. I think Ben did a blog once saying he'll like Wolverine using TB500.
So that Wolverine stack came from Jay Campbell.
Really?
Jay Campbell and Nick Andrews, his business partner, who is a compound pharmacist, they created a Wolverine stack. And he actually gave me that stack after I had, was it my tricep tear or my shoulder tear? I can't remember. After I came out with surgery, I think it was a tricep, And I tried the Wolverine stack, and it really did help with healing, but it didn't compare to the stem cells because I did that stack for about 4 weeks post-surgery, and then for the following 11 months, I was dealing with about 70% discomfort and 30% strength, which is better than nothing. But then after the stem cells, it reversed that. I had 70% strength and 30% discomfort, and it's just got better and better since. But of course, you're going to pay a lot more for stem cells. It's going to be much more invasive. You're having needles like this put into your joints. You can't really walk or move much for a good few days. But if you could have BPC 157 sent to your home, then why not?
Yeah, I mean, I've tested multiple peptides, actually. Post testosterone therapy, HCG, which is good for spermatogenesis, increasing your plum size, and HEP1 for various healing protocols for immune, and thymosin alpha-1 to help your immune system as well. And that was my post CV19 protocol. Actually, I've had remnants of the long haul from that, and then thymosin alpha-1 I did for a month, and it resolved everything I needed, and all my fatigue and everything was gone. So I've got a big history with peptides. And in fact, I used human growth hormones for a good 18 months, back in 2016, 2017, just because I felt so great on them. And obviously human growth hormone is a 91 branch chain. So amino acids, 91 folded on itself with very fragile bonds between it, which is why it's such a fragile, I guess, peptide. So yeah, I've really experimented with a lot of them. At one point I was doing 7 different ones a day. So yeah, and I found them to be very good.
Yeah, they are amazing. I think the people down in the Rhondda Valleys, down South Wales, they were some of the first people to use peptides, because you'd go down there years and years ago, and it was obvious everyone was on melanotan. You'd see the bleach blonde hair, they'd have the orange tan, but there's no sunshine around,
It sounds like Swansea.
Swansea, exactly, definitely.
There was a brand at the summit called Profound Health, and they do a Profound Health Summit where they have a peptide conference every year, actually, and they do the Bioregulator capsules, which are a very good way of doing, actually, peptides. or similar to. For instance, thymus gland or adrenal glands, and I found those to be very good. There was a prostate one that I tried, obviously, because now I'm 44, so I wanted to try that. And then there's the thymus gland, and then there's the liver support and the pancreas and all these things. So I had all of these, and I've done several courses, and I found them to be very good. Actually.
Yeah, Phil Mikens puts on an event there. Phil Mikens a great guy, and he introduced me to the peptides initially, and I've done the liver, I've done the kidney, the pancreas, Sunshine's done for the eyes. I got to do the prostate next. Definitely, that's about. And I think it's phenomenal. There's those are the sequence of amino acids that replicate for that organ for replenishment, and I think what is the attractive thing about those particular peptides for a lot of people is that they're oral instead of injectable, and a lot of people seem to be attracted to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the simple term is like heals like. So if you have adrenal fatigue, using adrenal glands, thyroid gland, that in the basic like heals like, but in the scientific side of things, looking at actually the nutrient makeup of the gland, and then having it encapsulated, and obviously the aminos and peptides within them, obviously, which is just the aminos strung together. So I think that's why they work so well. But the ancient way of saying it is, for instance, natural desiccated thyroid, instead of having thyroid meds, T3, you can have NDT, which is thyroid glands generally from pigs, which has the same T1, T2, T3, T4 ratio as a human. And people that have symptoms from using T3 alone don't generally have it on natural desiccated thyroid.
Yeah.
So like heals like, and yet the medical world kind of says, like heals like, that's a bit woo-woo. But in fact, when you look at the mineral and the nutrient breakdown, you can see that they're actually very similar to what we need to repair that gland.
Yeah. And I did my course of the liver bioregulators just prior to your event, and at your event you had a liver testing company, FibroScan, and thankfully everything came back all with flying colours, green. Now I don't know whether to dedicate it specifically to the bioregulators, because I was throwing a few things at it, obviously taking glutathione, suppositories and IV and a few other supplements as well, NEC, Tudka, whatever. But my thyroid, my liver enzymes were slightly elevated after I finished this diet 4 weeks ago. So I think that kind of helped a little bit. So that's 2. What's your third? I think we're on number 2. We finished 2 or 3. Now we're on now.
We're on the third.
Yeah, we're on the third. Yeah, what's the third?
The grounding shoes. If I talked about grounding in my talk, actually, in my top biohacks. I like the grounding shoes. Now there was Bahi, which do grounding shoes. Now they're bringing out some barefoot grounding shoes, which is great. BAHE for anyone listening is the brand. I really like that because obviously you can't be barefoot everywhere around the city, and you look like a complete plonker if you are. So grounding shoes are good. There is also a brand called Earthling, which are the shoe straps that you can put on any shoes to be earthed out. So I think that's it's a biohack that people don't even know you use, and the benefits from grounding are significant pretty much for every single person on the planet, and yet not many people ground. Luckily, obviously, I have the Samina sleep system, as you guys know, which is grounding when you're sleeping, so I get grounded for 7 to 8 hours every night anyway, so really that's as much as I need, so I don't need to wear the grounding shoes in general. But I think grounding shoes are probably, one of the top biohacks for me for the year as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. I actually wrote down mine, and I've got the grounding. I didn't put shoes, but I put grounding. And the one reason I've put particular in cities, the reason why I put that is because I don't know if you remember at the end of last year when I was in Mumbai, I was like, God, Tim, I'm just not sleeping at night. And I was going for a barefoot walk in the morning on the beach. And you said, try doing it twice a day. Do it in the evening as well. And I did it in the evening, and I instantly started sleeping better. Now, that can't be a placebo effect. I'm measuring it on my ring, but I'm sleeping. It can't be a placebo effect. So I think, especially when you're in a built-up environment such as Mumbai, where you're dealing with a lot of non-native EMFs, Wi-Fi, etc., a lot of dirty electricity for sure, then it is essential to, look into that. Don't think it's just woo-woo, but just quantify it. See if it does work.
The thing is, there's 23, I think it's actually 24 now, studies done on grounding, including peer-reviewed studies, showing the efficacy of it on health. And yet people consider it woo-woo, and yet it's one of the most basic things out there. And, people will take vitamin C for the antioxidants, and they eat blueberries, like Dom does when he's in the city. He buys antioxidant foods when he's in the city, and yet people don't get their shoes off and stand in the garden. Obviously reducing the inflammation, giving you the electrons to essentially neutralize free radicals in the body is amazing. And I think for me, the moment I realized grounding was so good was one, when I measured my own body voltage to see the difference it was before and after grounding, 20 minutes twice a day. But also looking at the work where there's red blood cell before and after. And you can see how, people that have an electron deficiency, red blood cells aren't equidistant. They're all clumped together and blood flow is not good, and therefore oxygenation isn't good, which means that they can be breathless because they're not oxygenated properly, and not necessarily good athletes as a result. Whereas after grounding, your red blood cells are equidistant, blood flow is much better, the whole body works better, including brain fog lifted. So yeah, that's why I think grounding, even though it's one of the basics or fundamentals as I call them, grounding shoes are a proper biohack, or the Samina sleep system, which obviously I love going on about. So that would be my next one for sure. Yeah,
awesome. And with Earthling, I actually used to wear the Earthling, but I was doing a lot of running at the time, and I'd go through them pretty quick. So I was really happy, and have no financial association with Bahi whatsoever. But when they came along, I was really, really happy because I was like, I can actually run in these shoes. They're comfortable. And because I fly so much, I ensure that I'm always wearing them when I'm flying, because the chances are when I land somewhere, I'm not going to find a grassy patch and earth myself. All right, and moving on to your biohack number 4. What hits the list?
Air quality. I mean, everything comes back to nature, ultimately. And the further we get away from nature, the sicker we get. And which is why astronauts need all of these different health hacks just to keep them running. So I think air quality is underrated. Obviously, when we talk about things like fabric, clothing, washing, powders and stuff like that, that's all in the air. Household toxins, furnitures with flame retardant chemicals in and things like that. Or when you're even cooking in the house and you can smell and it gets a bit smoky. All these things are bad for us, really bad for us, very carcinogenic in many forms. And yet we're breathing in thousands of chemicals. Even the rug, for instance, when I was buying this rug, considering the materials that's used to make the rug, and the cheaper they are, generally they're made out of plastics. And as a result, you're breathing in chemicals from them. And it's the same with memory foam mattresses, for instance. When you generally first buy a bed, you can smell the chemicals. It's awful. And we are breathing these in. In fact, I did a test with Omnos. I think it's the environment toxins one, and it showed that I had super high chemicals that come from petrochemicals, which I generally link to memory foam mattresses. This is before I had the Samina sleep system.
Wow.
So air quality is underrated, and yet when we're without air, any air, we know it pretty quickly. I mean, we'll be gone in a few minutes. But if we're breathing higher carbon dioxide, lower oxygen air, and if it's got toxins in it, it gets straight into the system. Like when you smoke a cigarette or something, you get high immediately if you're smoking drugs. This is how quickly it affects us. So making sure that your air quality is good as much as possible is critical. We just don't realize it straight away. If you're walking down Oxford Street, you can smell how thick the air and how many toxins are. It is carcinogenic. It is evil. And you just have to look at the media to see how many deaths there are a year as a result of air quality. So what do you do about it? I actually have an amazing air, which is behind the camera here, you can't see it, which runs on autopilot all day, every day. It also adds ions into the air as well, which are like seaside air, I guess you could call it, ions. It's to do with electrons, ions, and reducing inflammation. So the air feels better and for you, which helps reduce it. Like, for instance, almost reduces static electricity, so therefore the air isn't so energized, which is why in the city you feel the energy and in countryside you feel more relaxed. It adds ions into the air, but it also filters it through a multiple processes, carbon filter and various other things. The interesting thing is that when I had a new boiler put in the apartment, they took out the boiler and then they started cutting a bit of wood to take the boiler out, and within half a second the amazing air kicked in, went crazy because it has an automatic sensor. And I was like, why has it done that? What's it picked up? And when they pulled the wood out, black mold, where the boiler had water dripping onto the wood for years, and it was black mold. And so it picked it up. So that's just one example of mold toxins. Black mold, which is really, really, again,
neurotoxin as well.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's funny because when I moved into the place, and I didn't realise this at the time, I walked in and I was like, hey, it's a nice place, I like it, blah, 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 the lighting's quite good. But whenever I stood around this patch here, I'd always feel a little bit dizzy, and I never realised it. Turned out, actually, in the bathroom through the wall there, the shower had been leaking. The people that put the shower in before me, they didn't put insulating down, so the water had gone down behind the tiles and made it all black mold everywhere. And of course, when doing the bathroom, the filter goes off like crazy. So it's like, not only is it city air, it's super dusty, it's an old building, it's also got mold toxins in the air, and when I cook, within a minute, it picks it up and starts filtering the air out. So having filtered air is super important. Now, to the extreme is when you're flying, and this is why I don't like flying, although I do it quite a lot. When I measure the air quality, and I have an Altos air quality device, the air quality, so the carbon dioxide is super high. It's like in the ratings of 0 being good, 2,000, 3,000 being migraine level. In most flights, it's around 1,800 to 2,200 of carbon dioxide. So that means your brain becomes sluggish. The oxygen level is also low because they're recirculating the cabin air.
And it's pressurized.
And so it's low oxygen, which stresses your body and your natural defenses. It's high carbon dioxide, which means that you're sluggish and almost migraine-y. And you're having it for hours. So it's super high in static electricity, super low in all of the good things in the air that you need, which is why you generally get sick after a flight, because you're all sharing the same air and haven't got any good air quality. Some people actually find that they flourish when they're on a flight in terms of their mental clarity. They seem to be super focused. This I can't understand, but the point is for me, sometimes when I'm on a flight, I feel so focused. And I think, wonder or not, it's because there's no internet and I don't have distraction with Instagram or WhatsApp. Yeah. Who knows? But the point is that I know when I've flown, and that's because the air quality is so bad. So while an amazing air filter, for instance, can't give you more oxygen, it can take out the pollutants, which is half the problem.
Yeah, and I've actually had one of those pollutant meters in the house, and it's crazy to think that sometimes your home is more polluted than the air outside, even if you're living in a city, which is crazy because, like you said, you've got all the lacquers, the acids, the paints, what's in the fabrics, it's surrounding you. So I think you brought up a very good point. It's very important for you to check out the air quality in your house because, like you said, you're breathing all the time. But again, people, much like EMFs, they don't see it, they don't think about it, they're not concerned about it, they take it here for granted.
Yeah, I think it's a compound effect of all these different things.
Yeah. Okay, what's number 5?
Community and friendships. I think one thing that I've always been a fan. I like people. I like understanding people, and I like good relationships. And through my younger years, you have toxic friendships and people that drain you, and you don't necessarily realise the importance of losing them. And having over a 20-year background in psychology, I realised the more and more, how our upbringings affect our adult lives, and all the different triggers and things like that. And for instance, actually I won't go into that specific, but the point is community is important. And I think surrounding yourself with great people is important. For instance, there's an Instagram post I saw a few months ago, which is like, if you hang around with 5 sick people, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around with 5 lazy people, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around with 5 millionaires, you'll be the 6th. It's the same for health. And I think, having a new girlfriend, 5 months ago now, a lot of her habits were poor. Like, for instance, I could go through my real list of dry shampoo, breast implants, eating processed foods. All of this stuff is basically a tick list for her life beforehand because she didn't know better. And then when she starts hanging around with me and realizing these are the impact of these things, she's changing them one by one, not because I want her to, but because she has the awareness. So my point is if you have lots of people that are all in the same mindset around you, it's going to help elevate you if you choose to be in the growth mindset. Or you can say, you're wrong, I don't want to listen. So not giving energy to people that are negative influences or draining, and giving energy to the people that are great helps elevate you. And I think, this is one thing I think with our social circle, with you, Dom, and I, and Ryan, albeit a little bit further out, I find that it holds us all accountable, and we lift each other up and have great experiences regardless. And it doesn't matter if we're in the same walks of life, or in the same positions, or in the same countries. It's like, actually, we call it the wolf pack, as you know, but it's like, it's awesome to have different opinions from experts in different areas, and that helps elevate us. Versus, for instance, my girlfriend has her past friends, or should I say her friends group, are all quite gossipy or negative or unhealthy, and doesn't really understand the element of having great people as positive influences in your life. And as a result, she's drawn backwards from it. And then she starts seeing my social circle and the community at the summit, and all these things. She's just like, wow, I didn't realize that people like this existed, and like how lifting, and how she's gone into growth as a result. So community is really underrated. You don't have to live with an abusive partner or have a really tough childhood with your parents that are passive aggressive or whatever to understand the impact of this on your life on a daily basis. Life can be completely the opposite if you pick the right people, and we have the choice to pick the right people, and we have an abundance of great people. So so community is free. It's just a mindset and understanding it. And there's no device or brand that supports that other than the health optimization site.
It does support that, though, because there's people that I've met due to the optimization summit, or through you, that I consider, like Dom, as a close friend now, even though we don't see each other that often. One of the highlights of coming to this event is just hanging out. When there aren't that many people that I click with, for sure. I have, I guess, of all the biohacks, I'd say my social connection is something that I need to work on more, because I'm always a bit of a hermit. And, but knowing, like we know about the blue zones, that common thread that people have who live to that disproportionate age of being a centenarian or older in good health, is having that human connection. It kind of gives people more purpose. Like even looking forward to coming to the event, to hanging out, that gives us purpose. It isn't always the connection, it's the thought of that connection as well that I think is very important. And as you mentioned, being around people that are like-minded in health, as opposed to what we know, like for instance, in a place like UK, the social connection is usually surrounded by a pub. And that is kind of not necessarily healing your future, it's probably harming it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've come to the end of this, because I know you've got an important call to meet now. But one thing that I just want to finish with is that, over the past year, your social platform has just exploded, but for good reason. You're putting out amazing information on there every single day. Some people will complain about it. It's like, God, I can't do anything that is going to be promoting my health. Apparently, I'm just taken away from it. But you put in a lot of information out there that is free of charge, that people can learn from. So can you tell people where they can find you?
Instagram. Tim Biohacker.
Tim
Biohacker. All one word.
Biohacker. Okay. Yep. And we will link that below in the show notes.
And if they want to come to the summit, summit.healthoptimization.com. And next June in London, 2,600 people is what we got this year. 2,636, so we'll see what we get next year. But we're growing year on year, so come along.
Yeah, and I will highly recommend that you do. I'll definitely be there. So thank you very much, brother. I really, really appreciate this, and appreciate your home.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.